Welcome everybody to the Stanley Cup Final Preview. This is the second time in this channel that we've done something like this to talk about the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. Second time ever in this YouTube channel that we have done so. Talking about this. The first time was last season when we know the story or watched the situation with the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights where they lost in 5. Were never able to win a game in Vegas. They got one game in Game 3 in Sunrise. That was the first ever Stanley Cup win in franchise history. And then they lose the rest of the games. The story is going to be different in this series between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. So after the Game 6 against the New York Rangers, we're wondering who is going to be our opponent. Will Dallas be able to force Game 7, or will Edmonton take the Western Conference Finals? And that's who we're going to play against. And the answer to that is they were able to do their job on Sunday against the Dallas Stars. Was it Sunday? Yes, it was Sunday. So yeah, that's going to be our opponent. Florida Panthers versus Edmonton Oilers, and for the first time in franchise history, the Florida Panthers will start and host the Stanley Cup Finals at Emirates Bank Arena. How did both teams get here? Well, Florida Panthers had a little bit of a shaky start. I covered all the games from the first game of the regular season against the Minnesota Wild all the way to the final game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We had a few shutouts from there and there. We had a shutout against we got a shutout loss against Minnesota, and I'm gonna go through this thoroughly in the season review once the Stanley Cup is over. Hopefully we win. And we had shutouts from Seattle, Vancouver, Carolina in some cases. There were a little few bumps in there, but the spark comes up. They won a 9-game win streak. We were number 1 in the league for a moment or so, and then lost 4 games in a row. It was kind of bumpy, but they were able to pull through. And then when we got to the end, we knew we were going to make the playoffs. It was non-negotiable. We knew the Florida Panthers were going to make the playoffs. It was decided when we were playing the game against the Islanders, and I think Detroit or Ottawa, Buffalo, I forgot who else. Who cares? Lost, and the Florida Panthers were able to clinch to the playoffs fairly easily compared to last season. That part was a shaky. It was a shaky time frame. It was pretty shaky. They were not able to find the momentum they had, so they got cold. But I think they realized the playoffs coming up, and they need to, get some wins in to get the momentum to the playoffs. So we knew we were going to make the playoffs. Now, it was an interesting point where we talk about seeding, because Boston was on top of the Atlantic Division, and it became a hot potato between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. They had who's going to decide who's going to win the Atlantic Division, and ultimately it all shockingly came down to the final day. The final game of the regular season against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where we beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, and if we didn't, well, most likely we're going to play the Maple Leafs anyway. That was going to be like, okay, we're going to talk about the Maple Leafs and stuff like that. But no, what ended up happening was Panthers beat the Maple Leafs. We knew this because they had the insane second period. But Ottawa somehow beating Boston in Boston 2-1 or 3-1. I forgot the score. Who cares? So Florida ends up taking the Atlantic Division, and they played against the series against Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, initially, I was pretty stressed out. It's a battle of Florida. Tampa always had the upper hand against us, but the Florida Panthers knows everything about the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they were able to beat them in 5. So there was a gentleman's sweep at Sunrise. We saw that insane Bobrovsky save at Game 2 where he lost the puck and he just had to lunge with his left arm. It was awesome. And they were able to pull us off in 5, and that was incredible. Then we played Boston, because Boston, no surprise to anyone, they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7. And then that's who we got next, Boston Bruins. We beat them in 6. I was there in one of the games, and the other 2, watch party. So that was incredible as well. I was there for game 2, and I had the vlog on if you want to go watch it. And then we played the Rangers, the President's Trophy winners. I said in a preview, we've beaten President's Trophy winners before. Can they do it again? Short answer is yes. They were able to do so in 6. And that's how we got here. For the second consecutive year, the Florida Panthers have made it to the Stanley Cup final. They never did that in franchise history. But this is only the 3rd trip to the finals. So that's how we got here. The final record was 52-24-6 with 110 points. So that was that right there. How about the West? Let's talk about Edmonton. That is our Stanley Cup opponent. Edmonton Oilers is quite possibly astonishing. They had quite possibly one of the most ugliest starts, ugliest start of the franchise I've seen. Let me see. When did the when did the season start? October 11th, right? I was in Los Angeles. I was on a cruise. They lost 8-1 to Vancouver. 4-3 Vancouver was a clip. They had the first win against the Predators 6-1. Okay. Then they lost. They lost 4 in a row? Yeah, 4 in a row. And they were just flat out not good. They were losing a bunch of games, including the game against the San Jose Sharks. And it got so bad to the point where they had to fire their coach, Jay Woodcroft. And they bring in Chris Knobloch. They bring in Chris Knobloch. And oh my God, when it turned out to be a pretty good hire. Because since the miserable, and I mean miserable start of the season, the Oilers were able to figure them out, able to figure out the league. Now, did they start off hot right away? No, they did not. They were still struggling, trying to find something. Although one thing that hasn't changed, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, McDavid, but we'll talk about that. But since hiring Knobloch, they were trying to figure things out, and then after the whole thing with the losing, then they almost did something historic. They had a 16-game win streak. 16 game win streak before finally losing against the I believe it was the Vegas Golden Knights. This was after the All-Star break. Yeah, they were insanely hot. They were absolutely a hockey team to be trifle with. And this is after the Florida Panthers beat them twice. So everything's changed. Everything's changed from what happened. They did make the playoffs. Their final regular season record would be, 49-27-6. That's 104 points. They were second in the Pacific behind Vancouver. Then, excuse me. Then they make the playoffs anyway. Now, in the playoffs, they beat, let's see here. They beat the Kings in 5. Let me see. Yeah, they beat the Kings in 5. Then they win a series against the Vancouver Canucks. That is a wild series for the Oilers fans and Canucks fans. Absolutely wild. But they were able to prevail in 7. Vancouver was a great team, but Edmonton come out just a little bit better. And now, granted, there was some disadvantage for Vancouver. Who was a hoster who had something going on with his health. It was unfortunate. Hopefully, it gets better. But Edmonton were able to be better than Vancouver in 7 games, nonetheless. And they play against the Dallas Stars. And Dallas Stars was number 1 in the Central Division in the Western Conference. And Edmonton was able to beat them in 6. And here we are. That's how both teams get here. Players to have an impact on both sides. You have Matthew Tkachuk. That's one thing. Barkov is another. Reinhart is the beast in scoring. But at Edmonton, they have Connor McDavid. That is no question about it. 132 points with 32 goals. Now, 32 goals is really good for McDavid, absolutely. But his playing, his assists, incredible. 100 assists. That's 132 points. 32 goals plus 100 assists equals 132 points. So McDavid can handle the puck, and he can score, and he can play make. But Reinhart has 57 goals. 57. That is insanity already with 37 assists. He can score, and he can really score on power plays, on special teams. Hyman for Edmonton is also good. 54 goals. Absolutely. And goalkeepers. Now, here's the thing with Florida Panthers versus Edmonton Oilers. When we played the Oilers in November, December, we were not playing Stuart Skinner. Because Stuart Skinner now is playing in these playoff games. No, we were playing against Calvin Pickard. Do you all remember him? Pickard or Pickard, wherever how you pronounce his last name. Either way, we were playing that goalie. We never played Stuart Skinner. So this is entirely new for the Florida Panthers to get a feel of what Skinner's capable of. But the Edmonton Oilers, let me double check back in the regular season. They did play Bobrovsky. Not once, but twice. So it's possible that McDavid has something planned against Bobrovsky, because Bobrovsky has been incredible. We never played Stuart Skinner, but the Oilers did play Bobrovsky twice this season. So could they figure this out? We don't know. Both times the Oilers played the Panthers, when Bobrovsky got net, they lost twice. And one of them they should have won, and this was the game without Barkov. And that was a 5-3 win over Edmonton in Florida. And then we go to Edmonton and beat them 5-1. And that was that era where Florida Panthers were not playing good hockey. So we really don't know. Now, the head-to-head record between these two teams, Edmonton 14-8 over the Florida Panthers. 14-8 against the Florida Panthers in head-to-head statistics, not including playoffs, and that's impossible. Now you can include the playoffs in this equation because they finally able to meet each other in the finals. Edmonton, 18 years not going to the Stanley Cup final, losing to, I believe, Carolina. Their last Stanley Cup win was back at 84-85. So also, that's about 40 years ago. And I think that was against the Islanders. So they're due for a Stanley Cup win. I just hope that's not against us. McDavid has a lot to prove. And majority of the NHL is behind McDavid. It seems so. Now, could they possibly say that Edmonton might possibly win this because of McDavid? Absolutely. But you have to note a few things. Number one, McDavid's not going to be the only thing that's just going to be a playmaking. They have a really good shooting core. And not to mention, they have a very, very good special teams. Might be better than Florida's. I'm serious. Now, when we look at the playoff stat from both sides, Florida's goals per game is 3.24. Edmonton has 3.50 goals for per game as when they score in 3.50. So Edmonton has the upper edge. Goals against, and this is where Florida can take advantage of, is the defense. Edmonton is the number one offense of the league. Florida is also number one defense. So it's one of those offense versus defense finals. Goals against, Florida has 2.29. Edmonton has 2.61. roughly almost as close. And same with goals for per game. It's close. Power play, this is where we're kind of afraid of for us Florida's folks. Edmonton has 37.3% percentage in power play. Florida only has 23.3%. And penalty kill, it's almost close. But Edmonton still has the upper edge with the penalty kill with almost at 94%. Florida is just 88.2%. Shots per game, Florida with more shots aggression with 32.2, with Edmonton is 28.9. Shots against, it's close. It's very close. 24.5 for Florida and 25% for Edmonton. And face-off wins is 50.6% for Florida, 47.3% for Edmonton. So it's close. It is really close. That's what the NHL is saying in these playoff stats. It's going to be a good Stanley Cup Finals. It's going to be very, very good. They're already talking about narratives of, Canada has not won the Stanley Cup in over 30 years, and that's true. The last team that's done that is the Montreal Canadiens. But yet, Florida has never won a Stanley Cup final. They are absolutely due to win the Stanley Cup final. Absolutely. This is probably the best chance the Florida Panthers will get of winning it all. They have a pretty good farm system. The Everblades is in the finals. Charlotte Checkers, I think they made the playoffs, but they're a pretty good team. So they have a good farm system in case something goes wrong. Bill Zito always has the plans to keep the game to keep the team in check. But either way, there you go. Florida Panthers versus Edmonton Oilers starts tomorrow night. Game 1 is at sunrise. June 8th at Sunrise, Florida. That's where it starts off. And we have 3-day gaps in a lot. And one thing, and this is probably not a big deal for us, but for them, it's definitely a big deal. This is they have the longest distance cities in the finals history in NHL. Now I think it broke the record. 2,400 miles apart. And then you go from Sunrise, really Fort Lauderdale, because Fort Lauderdale Airport is the main airport for Broward County. If you go to Miami-Dade, it's obviously Miami International. But if you're in Broward County, of course, the airport is obviously going to be Fort Lauderdale's. Or either way, who cares? You go there, you fly up. And then for what I heard, you have to take another flight from that spot. I'm not sure where, but you have to take that flight to Canada, up to Edmonton. I don't know if the flight can go that far. They should go that far, I think, because, flights what I did years ago when I went to Europe. It took about 7 long hours. I'm not sure what the travel time is from between then. But either way, it's a long freaking travel. If that's the case, then NHL had the right idea to have a 3-day break between Game 2 and Game 3, and then Game 4 and Game 5, and 6 and 7, if necessary. So they have the right idea. So longest distance, they say it's the East versus West battle. Really, I feel like this is South versus North battle. It really is. Edmonton's the most northern NHL city in North America, in the league. The most northern city in the league versus the team that is the most southern team in the league. Because Florida Panhandle goes closer to the Gulf. Or not the Gulf, the equator than California does, where it goes up. California is like this. Florida is a little bit further to the ocean. Closer to the equator, if you know what I mean. So that's why we're the most southern point in the league. And it's not even close. It's not even close. Anyway, a lot to cover here in this. Definitely going to be a pretty good if not the most stressful final we'll ever have. And I have faith in the players that they can do it. I myself am a fan of stress. Most people say don't be stressed. They're going to win. You just never know. You just never know. Either way, guys, that is it. There's your preview for this one. If you like this video, consider hitting that like button and consider subscribing to this channel. We're going to go through this every game that I can. I've covered this from the beginning of the season. I even did a season preview all the way up to now to this point. And for those who stuck with me from the beginning to the end, I strongly appreciate it. It's been one heck of a ride, and I'm very excited to do this again next season for you guys, with you guys. It's been so much fun. But one more road is the finals. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Hit the like button and subscribe for more content because Miami TVG is back. And what he does super right there with the viewers you deserve. This is Miami TVG. So, folks. Good night, everybody.